Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. A couple of videos ago, I shit all over the 308, and here's what I said in that video. I personally actually fucking hate 308 Winchester. Well, hate's probably a strong word. To me, 308 Winchester is the Holden Commodore of cartridges. Some people think it's really awesome. Other people think it's really shit. Everyone else is sort of in the middle of like, well, you know, it does get you from A to B. You can't deny that. Now, in response, Ross Murrah jumped on there, clearly a 308 fan, and he said, I've never heard people saying the 308 is shit. Commodore, Ford, Toyota, whatever. It's popular worldwide for a reason. It's versatile and effective. You know that. To which I replied, I know plenty of people who call 308 shit. To which he replied, yep, you've said that a few times now. 50 million people who might beg to differ are interested in your reasons. Care to share them? I don't really know where you got 50 million people from. Sounds like you pulled that out of your bottom. However, here is the reasons why I hate 308. Some rules for this video. We're talking about 308 as a deer hunting cartridge, not as a plinking round or whatnot, because I'm a hunter, I don't give a shit about plinking. If that's your bag, then that's your bag, but if you're plinking, you're probably not going to use 308 anyway. You're probably going to use 223 because, you know, reasons. We are going to cut away the muzzle energy portion of this because it's kind of a bit poo. We're just going to go straight to 100 meters because that's roughly the first range you're going to be shooting a target at anyway. So unless you're shooting deer like prisoners of war, you're probably not going to be shooting them at, you know, the muzzle. So that kind of negates that point. I've broken this up into categories. We have the 150 grain category. We have the 165 grain category, the 180 grain category, and then I threw in some 200s because I know that someone out there is going to say, yeah, but I hand load 200 grain bullets, and we'll talk about them as well. Now, in each group, we have competitor cartridges that other people would use for deer hunting. Now, I got some of these cartridges from a list from the Patreon page, so thank you very much to those guys who contributed over there. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. So at the 150 grain range, the round I've picked here is a 308 Hornady 150 grain soft point. It's going 28-20 feet per second. Now that was probably the hottest one that I could find. Generally they're going about 2780, 2750. I found this one was a pretty hot load. That's what she said. So that's why I'm using that one, to give it the best advantage it can. Now, it's going up against the 6.5 Creedmoor with 143 grain ELDX, the 7mm08 with 150 grain ELDX, and the 270 Winchester in a Hornady loading with 140 grain SST. The 6.5 Creedmoor, which is going 2,700 feet per second, is going 2778, and the 308 beats that, going 2880. However, if you stretch that out to 500 meters, you can see that it's 1666 versus 1072. Now the green and the red, if you've watched my other ballistic videos, you already know this, but for those who are playing along at home, green means it's above 1500 joules, which means it's good enough to kill a deer. Red means it's below 1500 joules, which means it's not quite good enough to kill a deer. Obviously it's still gonna kill a deer, but that's that ethical, bloody metric thing that we're using. When we compare it against the 7mm08, which is the same weight bullet, which is a higher BC and going slower, you can see this one's 2770. We can see that at 100 meters, because of that BC, it's already got more energy retention. So it's 3044 joules of energy. We stretch that out to 500 meters and we've got 1749, which is actually better than 6.5 Creedmoor. So that's pretty funny because fuck 6.5 Creedmoor. When we go to the 270 Winchester, the same thing again. We're going 3000 feet per second with 140. Now you can push 150s. But 140 is probably the most likely one that a deer hunter is going to use in that. And it's absolutely flogging it, 3478. We go to 500 meters, 1872 versus 1072. So it's 800 joules more energy at 500 meters. Now, if you put that up to 150 grain, you would have more energy again at that range because it would be going faster than the 308. So, let's move on to the 165. Now, I know what you're saying. No one really hunts deer with a 150 grain bullet. Usually you're only hunting fallow. If you're hunting sambar, you know, most people step it up to a 165. And I will jump in the 308 camp for a second here. Mel hunts on Instagram, so mel.hunts, I'll throw her handle up at the bottom here. She hunts with a 308. She's shot a lot of fucking deer, and she uses a 165 grain Hornady whitetail bullet, and she swears by it. She drops a lot of deer with it. Now, this video is not saying that you can't do it with 308. I'm saying that there's better things out there to do it with. If it floats your boat, then it floats your boat. She's a small-bodied woman, so she would like to have something with a little bit less recoil. If 308 floats your boat, then you can use a bloody 308. However, in the other cartridges that fire a 165 grain bullet, or thereabouts, let's have a wee gander. At 100 metres, the 308 from Hornady, this 165 grain bullet, is putting out 3,040 joules of energy. If we put that same bullet into a 30-06, it's going to push it, 200, 250 feet per second faster. We're now getting 3,683 joules of energy. We stepped it out to 500, we can see that we're at 1776 with the 30-06 and only 1420 with the 308. Now let's go to the 7 Rem Mag, pushing 162 grain ELDX, factory ammunition, 2975 feet per second out of a 24-inch barrel. Look at the BC on that, 631, and that's the reason why 7 mils will always be better than 30 cals. 3844, so we're going 200 joules more energy than even the 30-06. And then at 500 metres, we're at 2,371. It doesn't dip below 1,500 joules of energy until 900 metres, which is pretty bloody good. So if you want to stretch your legs out, you may want to go with a 7 Rem Mag. On that 1,500 joules thing for 165 grain bullet, at 400 metres is the last range you'll get before it dips below 1,500. So if you're doing long shots, maybe don't use the 308. All right, stepping up again, let's go to 180 grain projectile, because a lot of people say if you use 180 grain, that's the best thing for sambar. It's got enough weight, punch big holes. All right, the hottest 308 load I could find for 180 grain in the tertiary look that I took was from Fiocchi. It's going 2620 feet per second. All right, so at 100 metres we have 3139 joules of energy. That's pretty bloody good. Let's just compare that to, so the 180 grain 308 has not got as much energy as the 165 grain 30-06. It has more than the 165 grain of 308 though. So stepping up does give you a tad more punch. It has more punch by about 100 joules, which isn't much. Now, someone asked me about 308 versus 338 Federal, so I thought I'd throw a Federal in here. It's not a very popular cartridge. I think it's pretty cool. When I was going down the route of doing a 358 Winchester, I did look at the 338 Federal. For me, the 358 just kind of won out there for various reasons that I won't mention in this video. With the 30-06, we've mentioned that. So 3656 at 100, and then 1788 at 500. Now, if we step up again to 300 Win Mag, pushing 178 grain ELDX. At 100 metres, it's 4,117, which is probably why 300 Win Mag is one of the most popular deer cartridges in Australia. It absolutely wallops them. At 500 metres, we still have 2,351 joules of energy. Now, interestingly, the 180 grain mark for a 300 Win Mag is probably the most standard that people shoot for sambar. And the 162 grain is probably the most standard that people use for a 7 Rem Mag. At 500 metres, the 300 Win Mag has 2,351 joules of energy, but the 162 grain in a 7 Rem Mag has 2,371 joules of energy at 500. So therefore, the 7 Rem Mag is better than the 300 Win Mag. Fight me in the comments. All right, so you're a hand loader and you're like, well, fuck you, you're an idiot. I hand load 200 grain bullets into my 308, haha, suffering your jocks. Well, here we go, let's look at some 200 grain load data. So I'm going to put it up against a 358 Winchester, which are my personal hand loads, and a 300 PRC, because we know that 300 PRC wallops the 300 Win Mag. I wouldn't really say wallop maybe. It does better than it though. And in the 300 PRC, we're using a 212 ELDX because that's the factory loading. Now, at 100 metres, I'm getting 2,957 joules of energy out of my 358 Winchester. The 308 with a 200 grain projectile, which is going 100 feet per second slower, beats it out by, what's that, 80 something, 70 something joules. Remember though, this 308 velocity for the 200 grainer is coming out of a 24-inch barrel, and I'm pushing my 358 out of an 18-inch barrel. So it's 6 inches shorter, therefore a much handier rifle. The fact that I can get 25-30 feet per second with a 200 grain projectile out of my 358 8-inch barrel is pretty bloody good. Now, if you were to drop the length of barrel of the 308 down to an 18-inch, you would probably only be getting, let's say, 2300 ish, maybe even less, maybe even 2250. Now your energy's just gone up the shit because your velocity's gone up the shit, so you can't really compare those two, or can you? You make the judgment on that. Now compare that to a 300 PRC with a 212 grain bullet and absolutely fucking knocks it out of the park. 100 meters, 46.69. At 500 meters, 29.27, which is about 1200 joules of energy more than the 308 with a 200 grain projectile. Now, I can hear you crying out, but it's more available. Well, you know, this little thing called COVID happened a couple of years ago where everything that was popular you couldn't fucking buy. So that kind of went out the window. I couldn't find any 308 during that period. However, everything else I shot I could find, including 30-30 Winchester, 7mm Rem Mag, 270 Winchester, and a few others that aren't really deer cartridges. However, the point I'm making is that's a moot point, because as we know, when the stocks go down, if it's a popular cartridge, everyone's going to run to the shops and fucking buy it all, and then you won't even have it in the first place. So yeah, that's a silly point to bring up. Now you're going to bring up about the cost. Here's just a quick little thing from whatever bloody gun shop this is. This is about average pricing across 308. So the lowest one we've got on there is really shit stuff. It's the Federal PowerShock 180 grain with $41 a box. And it goes all the way up to, what's this, about $86. I have seen it for 90 something dollars. So that's a very bloody broad range. That's $50 difference between the lowest and the highest. If you're looking for something fairly good, you're probably looking at the, you know, $60 mark at the moment for a box of ammo. To put that in perspective, I can get 7 Rem Mag, the cheap stuff for $45, and I can get the, you know, expensive-ish stuff for about $80. It's not really any cheaper, it's about the same as everything else. Now the thing is, with popular cartridges, they can afford to put the price up because they know that you're going to pay for it. If it's a less popular cartridge, they keep the price lower because they need to get your sale. So that's a moot point as well. Now look, what else can I say about 308? It's not really the best cartridge for varmint hunting, although you can do it. Wreck your pelts. It, you know, doesn't really have a very flat trajectory, which is kind of what you want for varmint hunting. It's the bottom end of anything that I would use for a deer cartridge. Perfectly fine for pigs. I think it's a great cartridge for pig hunting. I wouldn't want to be caught out in the bush with the stag of a lifetime with my dick in one hand and a 308 in the other. It just wouldn't really go well for me. I like to have, you know, something a little bit more punch. What I recommend is you find a cartridge that hits the hardest, that you can still fire accurately. For me, that's 7 Rem Mag. I go much higher than that, and I start not flinching or anything, but I start having groups open up. It's just the way that I'm holding the rifle and the way I'm managing that recoil. So for me, that round is 7 Rem Mag. My go-to close range stalking rifle is my 358, which recoils almost exactly the same as, in my opinion, the 308. Maybe somewhere between that and the 30-06. It's not that bad at all. So they're my 2 deer cartridges, and I'm going to stick to them. In conclusion, 308 is probably not the best cartridge out there. It has this persona about it that, you know, everyone loves it, and it's, I don't know, it is what it is. It's just the 308. So I hope you got something out of that video. I hope you're not too butthurt. This is my opinion. You're allowed to have your opinion. But, you know, I've got a platform I can put my opinion out on, and you probably don't. If you do, rebut me in your own video. Or I'll meet you in the comments below. It's good for the algorithm. Anyway, catch you next video, and hooroo.